We will not be bullied. President Cyril Ramaphosa once said, "We will not be bullied." That is one of the legendary statements that our president has ever uttered, ever. That sentence on its own, "we will not be bullied," was a political statement on its own. And that statement shaped the current political climate between South Africa and the United States of America. Of course, there were many other events that shaped the political climate between the United States and South Africa, such as when South Africa took Israel to the ICJ, the International Criminal Court of Justice. So there were many other events that led up to the current state we are witnessing. But that statement on its own was like, you know what? Listen, America. And we need to understand that we are dealing with a populist here. We are dealing with a sensationalist. We are also dealing with a propagandist. That other president is these three things that I've just mentioned. The very same president who made bogus claims about how South Africa is violating human rights of the certain other individuals that I don't even want to name in this clip. He made those bogus claims saying that South Africa has questionable laws that are violating human rights as far as land confiscation is concerned, and all of those crazy things that he was saying. And from there onwards, he's been on a campaign to delegitimize South Africa's presidency in the G20, and thereafter going further to delegitimize the G20 summit to be hosted in South Africa. He is rendering it incredible. He is making the whole world question the credibility of the G20 summit that is about to be hosted here, simply because of the fact that our president took a stance that we will not be bullied by you. Following all of that international campaign of delegitimizing South Africa's G20 presidency and also the G20 summit, there were many other claims that were coming forth and that are still coming forth. One of many being the auction and the bid for South Africa, whereby each and every country is getting or rather is bidding up this amount of money to buy certain pieces of land in South Africa. Ne? Those claims in particular, I am not going to say they are true or false, really. I'm not going to say they are true or false, but I want you to pay attention to the countries that are said to submit certain amounts of money to South Africa. Number one, all of those countries are BRICS countries. Now, I do understand that to a certain extent, South Africa is still in the receiving end of the BRICS, but is not necessarily in the receiving end, deep down into the gutter, right? You must know that there is some sense or some sort of partnership and economic agreements that are going on between South Africa and these BRICS countries, right? While I'm not confirming whether they are true or false, but many or some of those investments that have been going around circulating have already been in place, or rather some of those investments, or many of those investments, did not just mushroom now that there's a G20 summit. Many of those have been in the pipeline, and many of those have long been implemented. Let's start with Limpopo. In 2022, there was a Limpopo Provincial Mining, Energy and Industrialization 2022 Investment Conference. So the conference was held in 2022 in Limpopo. The Limpopo Provincial Government, in collaboration with the National Department of Minerals and Energy Resources, hosted the Limpopo Mining, Energy and Industrialization Investment Conference on the 29th to the 30th of September in 2022. The conference was a follow-up to the Limpopo Investment and Mining Conferences, which were held in 2021. Now let's come to the conference objectives. The investment conference sought to achieve the following: establishment of new enterprises in the agriculture and agro-processing sector, establishment of new enterprises in renewable and alternative energy, massive infrastructure development supporting the industrialization program, more uptake for the special economic zones and industrial park manufacturing infrastructure, and lastly, to build investor confidence in the Limpopo province economy. So as you can see there, that the Limpopo Mining and Energy Industrialization Investment Conference attracted 480 physical delegates and 1,500 delegates who connected virtually. And these delegates included local and international delegates from countries such as China, Brazil, Qatar, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, India, Cote d'Ivoire, Denmark, UAE, Kuwait, and the United Kingdom. So you can see that with that amount and that number of delegations, those who were present physically and those who were present virtually, chunks of investments were probably made, or rather investment projections were probably made. So from that investment conference, the province galvanized investment pledges to the value of 209 billion, and that was in 2021. 209 billion. To date, more than 7 major projects worth more than 50 billion are in the implementation phase. Now, it's important that we also apply like some common sense into like thinking ubana. That particular amount was pledged in 2021. Of course, throughout the years, more investments were coming in, more pledges were coming in that ended up amounting to that probably circulating amount that this one country had pledged to then invest in Limpopo. So what I'm trying to say is this: all of those countries probably yearly, or maybe there was some sort of measures that we can increase the investment to this amount of money, but to start with in 2021, because this report was made in this conference was made in 2022. So but to date, more than 7 projects that are worth more than 50 billion are in the implementation phase. So probably they have been pumping in some more investments, we understand, or better yet, more injection. Now let's come to the KZN coastline investments or potential investments. On the 31st of October this year in 2025, there was a statement that was released to the public that titled "The Investment Boom for KZN South Coast with Plans for Potchefstroom Harbour." The KZN South Coast is set to become a leading maritime and investment destination, with Potchefstroom announced as a beneficiary of the South Africa's landmark Small Harbours Development Programme. The national initiative, spearheaded by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. So the KZN South Coast is now the beneficiary of this initiative by Usihle Zikalala. So on the 31st of October in 2025, it was published that Infrastructure Deputy Minister Sihle Zikalala will officially today launch a landmark program to build new small harbors in neglected coastal towns, a key pillar of inclusive infrastructure development in post-apartheid South Africa. So the Deputy Minister will hand over the special economic zones, which will designate the areas and sites for massive infrastructure investment, creating a turning point for inclusive and sustainable coastal development. The Potchefstroom Harbour, or rather this KZN South Coast project, stems from this initiative by the South African government. Of course, the money from the government is not like just from the government. It's of course through investments, but this is where I think now this investment projects of the KZN South Coast or the KZN coastline is then speaking to. And also there was a KZN investment opportunities projection that was published for 2023/2024, and in that report it was outlined that the total investment value in terms of the projections is around about 13.6 billion. As you can see that there by the coastline of the KZN, there are projections of 842.2 million, 567, 11.5 billion, and 543 million. So the investment opportunities or the investment projections is not something new or something that just mushroomed now that there's a summit, right? These projections were made in 2020, probably made in 2023, for the terms 2023 to 2024, right? And these billions is certainly not something new, at least according to what is written in here. It doesn't look like it's something new. Now, in this report of these investment projections, let's come to agriculture. As you can see there, there's Duzi Forestry Engineers, Etala Biofuels, Ingasa Foods, Masibumba, Nyamane, Edom Farming, Moringa, Umhlabuyalingana, Macadamia Development. So all of those are these agricultural projects that certain projections of investments or investment opportunities were projected on them. Let's take, for instance, Duzi Forestry Engineers. It's an economic sector. The economic sector is agriculture and agro-processing. Now, I also want us guys to keep in mind that when we speak of investments, we're not just speaking of things like loans and all of those things. In simple terms, investments is like a particular person giving money to this business, right? More especially if this business has a prospect to go to grow, is promising that it's going to grow. So what happens is that this person invests this money. By investing this money, more job opportunities are going to be created, skills transfer or skills development, and technology development and technology transfer between these two people or between these two businesses is occurring, and so forth. So when a country is investing in South Africa, there are certain things that, or rather certain aspects that individuals are benefiting directly in terms of jobs, but also in terms of economic ties, because you must remember that South Africa is not a country that is existing in an island. South Africa is an economic country, is an autonomous country, is a sovereign country that has economic partnerships with certain countries, right? So we're going to be looking at these. It's the same report that had KZN investment projections. So we're going to be looking on these Duzi Forestry Engineers. So the amount of total investment value that was projected is 135 million. With that 135 million, so that investment value was going to, or rather was seen to have a potential of generating 150 permanent jobs, and that applies to all of those agricultural projects that I read earlier. Now let's come to Northern Cape. In the Northern Cape, the Chinese engineering giant Plant Power China, in partnership with Solar Africa Energy, is constructing South Africa's largest single-unit solar facility in the Northern Cape. Meanwhile, the UAE's Masdar already operates 3 wind projects of 140 megawatts in each province. As you can see there, it's China that is building the South Africa's largest single-unit solar facility. Solar facility speaks to the renewable energy. Meanwhile, the UAE is only operating 3 wind projects in each province of this country. So it's the China and the UAE that are spearheading renewable energy in the Northern Cape province. And of course, even in that instance, there are certain investments, large chunks of investments, but both probably from China and the UAE, or from China, the UAE, and other either African countries or other international countries that would have invested in this particular sector, that is renewable energy. Now let's come to India. India's pharmaceutical interests in KwaZulu-Natal. So for those who didn't know, India has a pharmaceutical-based company here in South Africa, which is a Cipla Biosimilars manufacturing facility. It is in Durban. It is in South Africa. So the India-based pharmaceutical company Cipla has announced plans to build a manufacturing facility in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. And this article particularly was published on the 18th of October in 2016. And some of the key Cipla products, Cipla pharmaceutical products, is the respiratory therapies that are used to treat conditions such as asthma and the chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases medicine people, or rather people in the health sector, are going to understand. I'm going to be butchering some of those of that pronunciation. The CIPLA is also responsible for the antiretroviral therapies, that is the ARVs. We all know the ARVs, and you'd understand that for many years we were getting ARVs and many other essential pharmaceutical products from the United States of America. And CIPLA, being an Indian company, or rather an India-based pharmaceutical company in South Africa, it is manufacturing these pharmaceutical products at a much cheaper price. For instance, recently America has stopped giving South Africa ARVs, but South Africans are still receiving ARVs, even though maybe they are not receiving the ARVs at a faster rate they used to receive them, because we're being supplied by the United States with ARVs. But there has not been any statement or any publication that was saying that South Africa is out of ARVs. And I think for the larger part, with many other smaller pharmaceutical companies, CIPLA has been supplying South Africa with these pharmaceutical products, such as the ARVs and so on and so forth. And lastly, let's come to the European Union as far as the green hydrogen is concerned. Now, on the 10th of October 2025, an article was published that Europe commits to 12.5 billion to power South Africa's green and industrial future. Now, the fact that now there are certain amounts of money that are said to have been pledged by the European Union, that also is not something new, because the European Union pledged a long time ago that it is going to invest an amount of $12.5 billion to power South Africa's green infrastructure. So it's not something that just mushroomed now that there's going to be G20. So once again, I'm not saying that what is circulating about these amounts of money from these countries wanting some pieces of South Africa are true or false. What I'm saying is that many of those investment pledges have been published before, and some are already in implementation. Not all of them mushroomed now that there's going to be a G20 summit in South Africa. What I know is that the president of that other country, together with these international and even local media houses, they are going to push as much propaganda as possible to feed us of the lies, to delegitimize that G20 summit, and also to deem it less credible for us. They don't want South Africa to host that G20 summit. And if you'd be against the summit sitting, we would be making the United States very happy. If you're against the whole summit sitting, you'd be making the United States very happy, because that is their end goal. That's why they are boycotting it, and that's why they recruited Argentina to join it in boycotting South Africa based on human rights violation lies. Of course, we're still going to be protesting for the fact that South African government failed to declare the plague that we are faced with as the women and children and many other groups in South Africa as a national disaster. We are still going to be marching and protesting for that, because it is also equally important. But then I felt as though it is also important to touch on the fact that many of those amounts that are circulating in social media about these other countries wanting to invest in South Africa, that some of those projects and some of those investments have already been announced and some are already in implementation. Adding on my previous clip, the G20 summit is not a meeting to auction South Africa to these different countries that are alleged to have been bidding for pieces of land in South Africa. That is what Donald Trump wants you to believe, because he himself is not going to participate in the G20 summit that is going to be hosted in South Africa. That man is the biggest propagandist in the whole world. So let's try and shy away from conspiracy theories and lies. I'm going to put up slides that could account for some of the information that is being provided in the misinformation that is currently circulating in.
Hello Mzansi, welcome to Mgosa Mzansi. If today is your first time visiting this channel, please do the right thing and click the subscribe button. Indaba ye-G20 isusela umkhulu umsindo South Africa le nto abantu abaningi banga-understand ukuthi kahle kahle yani le G20 lefika la South Africa. Labanye abantu baqabanga ukuthi they are trying to sell South Africa bayifaka ku-auction so that some countries badokhona kuthenga some parties offer South Africa. Some are thinking ukuthi if not then ngani labantu babaleke ngalendlela to a point ukuthi la kuyobe ku held wakhona that meeting kuyobe kugadele enye security bathi nzima kabi. So people are just saying ukuthi into letendekala la South Africa that we are not aware about, that we have no knowledge about ukuthi kahle kahle what is really happening. Ito ufunani kahle kahle le G20 la South Africa. Please do comment what you think below down on the comment section. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. Mina nawe siyobonana kule enye le video. I'm signing out. Goodbye.